Well, good morning. My name is Jim Schaefer, and I'd like to welcome you to today's planners gathering. Um, we have Dr. Jacqueline Stavros, who is a professor at College of Business and IT at Lawrence Technological University, and she is also the co-author of Conversations Worth Having, Using Appreciative Inquiry to Fuel Productive and Meaningful Engagement. Couple of things before we get going. The meeting is being recorded and it will be available at oakgov.com, and I will put the link in the chat shortly. Your audio and video are muted. As we're going through the presentation, please send any questions to me in the chat directly, and we'll have a moderated Q&A afterwards, after the presentation. And as always, closed captioning is available, and you can enable that on your toolbar. Okay, Jackie, take it away.
Thank you. I want to thank Jim and thank Maddie, who's doing the tech support. So thanks for coming today. You should have received from Jim a little guidebook because I'm going to do about a 90-minute presentation in 50 minutes. And this way you don't have to take as many notes. There'll be a little GB in the page number in the slides so you can follow around. Because there's many of us. Normally I'd have you type in the chat and I'll probably say to you, go ahead and write something down in your guidebook. So we're going to get started. Why is this gift up here? Today is a gift. When I told Jim I'd come talk to you, I went to the website and looked at all the presentations you've had since 2022. And a lot of them were very technical. And this is not a very technical presentation. You're going to walk away with I call it a life-giving habit and two techniques that you would want to be using to move from either internal conflict in a room that you are at. You could even use that at home, conflict if you have teenagers. But this is more than just using at work. And that's you're going to learn to communicate with intentionality, clarity, and care. So communication is key today. It impacts everyone and everything. And there's just some research up here, but the one I want to point out is the foundational behavior that determines whether investments succeed or fail. This is the money that people put into their organizations and into their communities. Guess what? It's their conversations. It's their types of conversations. And the former CEO of LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner, said that, has anybody ever really taught you how to have a good conversation? And he said, that's the boot camp of the future. So your future has arrived. We're going to talk about something you do all the time, but maybe never thought about that. So there's 4 questions. And if you have the guidebook, if you printed it out on page 2, these 4 questions are right listed there. We're going to first talk about where are your conversations taking you and others and how powerful they are. I'm going to teach you a humanistic AI. What is the power of generativity in your questions and how you frame things when you're with folks? And how can your questions help you and others soar? So just think about this. Where are your conversations taking you and others? Your words are going to either put people into a protect mode or a connect mode with you. And your words are going to make people sink or they're going to make them soar. And David Cooperrider, who was my dissertation chair when I was at Case working on my doctorate of management, said, we live in the world our words create. So I'm going to show you how that comes to life. If you're following along in your workbook and you head over to page 4, I want you to, there's a question there. And I want you, and if you don't have the workbook printed out, just grab a blank piece of paper. I want you to think of a time you were in a conversation on the receiving end where people were defensive, people were blaming, people were in a protect mode, people were shaming, people were angry. And just write down in your guidebook or a blank piece of paper, how does that feel in your body? And that's on page 4. How does that feel in your body? Because you're muted and we're not going to use the chat's for questions. Most people write down that this feels tense, their shoulders hurt, they have a headache, they're feeling smaller. It's really not good for you and how you are feeling. And the science behind this is what I want you to do, even though I can't see all of you because your cameras are off, but I want you to raise your hands above your head. And so you get a little exercise at this presentation. I want you to put your hands behind your head. And I want you to look at where your thumbs are pointing. Your thumbs are pointing down. And these are critical, destructive conversations that are not worth having. And on page 5 in your guidebook is stuff about the science behind this, but you're in a protect mode and you either want to fight, you want to flee, you want to appease. But what begins to happen is if you had a smartwatch on, your heart rate is going up. This is not healthy for you or for anyone. So that's what happens when we're in a tense, negative conversation. All right, I want you to close your eyes, but I don't want you to fall asleep. But I want you now to clear your mind and I want you to recall a great conversation. You can go back to page 4 in your workbook, a conversation where things were energized. People were excited that you were there. They were engaged about the topic you were going to talk about. They really value you and your work. And I want you to write down, how does that feel in your body? Just take a moment and write down, how does that feel in your body? Okay, one more exercise here. I want you to now raise your hands high above your head once more. And I want you to take your hands and put them on the front of your forehead. This is the prefrontal lobe. Pay attention to where your thumbs are. This is a conversation worth having. This is the executive function of the brain. And there's a lot of research in there that I've highlighted in your guidebook. This enhances your immune system. You have oxygen, everything's flowing everywhere around your body. You're sitting up straighter. This is where we connect with people. We're open and we're connected. So there's a lot of science behind this that a conversation worth having is really a healthy place to be. And our conversations, they're only partially visible to people. And if you look at this iceberg here, what I don't know is I don't know when you step into a meeting room, what's going on below the ice, the tip of the iceberg. I don't know if you're dehydrated, if you were forced to come to this meeting. I don't know what your beliefs are compared to my beliefs, but there is a lot that we don't know about each other and all the people in the room. There's only a little bit of visibility if people are by their nonverbals, if they are above the line. And this line is really important because, again, I'm going to go back to the research. The research on the mind, the neuroscience, tells you that if you're not intentional about yourself and where people are in the room, you experience the amygdala hijack in a quarter of a second. And the practice that I'm going to show you, it's such a simple practice, is that when you realize how intentional you can be, if you're above or below the line, you can take that quarter of a second and really begin to stretch that time out so that you don't have a reaction, a trigger, a negative trigger. And if you do, you'll learn of how to control that trigger. So we're going to watch this video clip next. And this is a video clip that you can grab on YouTube and you can literally type in Conscious Leadership Group, where am I? And this is a video clip that I show to all groups that I engage in and say how important it is when we're going to talk about this to be above the line. So let me show you a little bit of the science in this video clip.
One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, They believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question: we are hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
All right, that's a really important video for you to know that you need to tell people where you are. Are you above or below the line? Usually people can tell when you're above the line, but it's when you're below the line, you need to tell somebody, I'm here today, but I need you to know that I'm a little bit below the line. I just lost my niece to cancer. She was just 2 years old. I had to tell people that I wasn't in a focused area. And people are human. They will give you some space. Versus coming in below the line, people are wondering, why is she so close? Why is she so disengaged? So it's really important to do that. I don't know if you ever heard of Brene Brown or Adam Grant, but they got in a public argument about 4 years ago. And it took them 4 years to resolve it. It came into my email today, and they just started a program called the Curiosity Workshop. So first thing I promised I would teach you today is one habit. And this is such a simple habit, and that's why this slide's been up here for at least 30 seconds, is to learn to tune in. When you say to others, especially if you're walking in a room of conflict, when people are really tense and you say, hey, folks, let's just all pause and take a deep breath. I mean, take a deep breath right now. Breathe in and exhale out for about 4 to 6 seconds. When you tell people to pause and just take a deep breath, you are actually, if they're below the line, you're resetting their parasympathetic nerve to come up to the line. That's magical. If you have kids, I was just talking to Maddie before this. She has 3 kids under 4. When you say, all right, kiddos, time out. Let's take a deep breath. You're bringing their emotions, you're bringing them to this line so that you can become more curious and connect. That's the gift today. What we're talking about works in really tense meetings in anywhere, anytime in the world. So the first thing is called tuning in. Just pause, breathe, and get curious and ask yourself, where am I? The link I have here and the link that's in your workbook, Jimmy Fallon brought Andrew Huberman on, and he said it was one of the highest ranking shows. We just taught people how to breathe. We did taught them box breathing. So there's a lot of information out there, the importance of pausing, breathing, and getting curious. So I assure you, you will fall below the line. We all do. We're human. The question is, do you stay below the line for 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days? Hopefully not 3 weeks or 3 years. But tuning in is the first habit you want to work on. Like I said, there are some people that have just joined in. Hopefully you have the guidebook with you because I'll be asking you to write some things down. And if you don't have the guidebook, make sure you ask Jim to send you the guidebook. A lot of what I'm talking about is in this booklet for you today. So this is something really important. And this is just a real simple example. Today, when you're out there in the workforce, Liam walked past me in the hallway. And I said, "Good morning, Liam." And he just walked past me. And sometimes there's things I make up. What stories do you make up? That's MSU, not the university MSU, but people make stuff up all the time. And another thing I want to teach you to do is ask yourself simply, what are the facts? I said hello. The person walked past me and didn't say anything. Now, sometimes we make up things about the person. That person ignored me, or that person is rude. And sometimes there's possible stories, maybe Liam was in deep thought and didn't hear me, or something was wrong. If you care enough about Liam, you'll ask him, "Hey, I saw you in the hallway today and you were really disengaged." Sometimes people have earbuds on all the time, and if you can't see their ears, guess what? And they have earbuds on, they can't hear me. So it's just really important to even yourself, before you start falling below the line or judging people, ask yourself, did Liam hear me? He seemed distracted. Maybe I should check on him. So it's really important to be curious. Harvard Business Review did an entire issue about the business case for curiosity. And it says that the most curious people have the most successful lives and successful organizations. So curiosity can improve your firm's adaptability and performance. So when we're naturally curious, we ask really good questions. And so I'm going to teach you 2 practices next. But if I were to ask you to pick up your pen and write down, when I say the word AI, or I say generative AI, what does that mean to you? Just take a moment and write down AI. What does AI mean to you? Most people today will say artificial intelligence. People in healthcare will say artificial insemination, but the AI I'm going to talk about is something different, and it's called a humanistic AI that was created at the Cleveland Clinic, and it's called Appreciative Inquiry. So this Appreciative Inquiry has been around since 1985 for quite some time. And appreciative inquiry is about discovering of what gives life to systems when they are at their most alive. So appreciative inquiry is, I value think about walking into these sessions you walk into at work and with your clients, is that you value the people. Now, people may all disagree, but you value the people in the situation and what we're going to talk to and how we have to add value and how we have to move forward. And then learning how to do inquiry, asking questions so that we can learn to let go and move forward on a certain situation. So appreciative inquiry fuels productive and meaningful engagement that creates conversations worth having and a positive leadership legacy. So this is a picture of David Cooperrider, who is my dissertation chair, my colleague. He's my dear friend now. And what I wanted to put in the middle, and I put in bold, is the quote he said: "Our organizational lives and the lives of others flourish or flounder one conversation at a time." And so in the planning area, where you're planning the community lives and the lives of other, they either flourish or flounder based on the conversations that you're having. So the next thing in your guidebook is on page 6. And these are 5 principles, whether you're above the line or below the line, that drive where you're going in a conversation. So I want you to just think about that our words create our worlds. And if we're in a very defensive situation, polarized, negative, it just, that more of that world gets created. And so we have to learn, how do we change that world? How do we ask questions differently? How do we frame problems? Because the moment I ask a question, I'm impacting you. I could ask a question on communication. I could say, tell me how communication is in this community. And I don't know if you're going to say, oh, it's great, or if it's bad, or if you're just apathetic about communication. But I probably have some kind of sense if I'm asking the question. What I really want to know, especially if communication isn't well, is how do we communicate better? What are signs of great communication? And so we can really direct, I want to learn about how do we communicate better as a team. The poetic principle is you have a choice in how you ask a question. And the anticipatory principle is what you see is what you expect. And that was Henry Ford. If you think you can win, you can. And if you think you can't, you can. And there's a lot of science behind positive images and actions produce positive results. At Lawrence Tech, I work with a lot of athletes and I work with a lot of coaches in the behavioral science. And I say it's really important to go to practice and practice your ball, practice shooting the hockey puck, but also visualization is very powerful. And visualize is just as important as actually practicing it. So these are just 5 principles, and they're all laid out in your guidebook there on page 6 that I want you to think about as it relates to your conversations. Also in your guidebook is something called a 5D cycle. Now realize I spend an entire day teaching people on appreciative inquiry, and I only got 50 minutes with you folks. But in your guidebook, this is a 5D cycle that if I'm going to pull people together for a very important planning meeting, we need to talk about what is the task. We need to have time to discover what is it that gives life to this topic we want to talk about. What might be, how do we design this, and how we empower action. So this 5D cycle is used to think about an engagement with some clients that you're going to have. It could be a meeting, it could be anything, but it walks you through how do you want this conversation with these people to go. This slide just is, I call it my credibility slide. It's a slide that shows you the organizations, and you may recognize some of these logos here that have used appreciative inquiry in my career in the last 25 years, that we've gone in there and we've used this to create innovations. We've used this to change communities. So I remember one of the first organizations I worked with 20 years ago was Green Mountain Coffee Roasters. And if you've ever used a Keurig, they use the appreciative inquiry 5D cycle to decide how do we innovate? Could you imagine how do we prototype if people had a machine that could make a single cup of coffee? So Green Mountain Coffee Roasters has been using appreciative inquiry. So there's hundreds of stories out there in the world. If you were to Google appreciative inquiry, you'd get 6.3 million answers in like a quarter of a second. So I encourage you beyond this presentation, just check it out. Yet I leave you with something very important, that appreciative inquiry is not about ignoring what's wrong, what the negative. It's about seeing the world differently. It's looking through, the first time I learned about appreciative inquiry in 1995, there was an article looking through the eyes of a child. A child is very curious and inquiring into the best of what was, what is, and what you want more of. I promise you, people will complain to you. They won't like things, and you have to be able to name it. But at some point, you have to say, okay, then let's move forward and search for the best of what was, what is, and what could be. So that's the second question we answered, which was appreciative inquiry. So the third question, and you can go to your guidebook and look at types of questions that resonate with you. And these are questions that you can practice. I've been practicing this for about 25, almost 30 years now. And this is like my operating system. So no matter how bad things get, I can use appreciative inquiry to ask questions to help people move from being stuck to unstuck, to help in really negative situations, to frame what do we really want to happen and what do we really want to talk about. So this brings me to the third question that's in your guidebook, the power of generativity. And there's 4 types of conversations. So my colleague Sherry Torres and I, when we came together and we wrote this book, Conversations Worth Having, we did a lot of research in the types of conversations people have and the guide points. So what I want you to do now is, if you still have your workbook in front of you, Just head over to page, let's see. Yeah, page 8, in your guidebook. And I want you to think about this for a minute. From the moment you get up in the morning until you go to bed at night, during your awake hours, what percentage of your time on a scale of 0 to 100% is spent in conversations? That includes talking to yourself in the morning. That includes talking to others. That includes picking up your phone and texting, Snapchatting, emailing. What percentage of your waking hours are you in a conversation? It's social media, email, talking to yourself. I'll just pause for a second. If you have your guidebook or a blank piece of paper, write that down when you're awake. Most people write down anywhere from 80 to 120% of their waking hours that they're having conversations. And I bring this picture up here of the fish is I want you to think about conversations are like the water that fish swim in. A fish doesn't know how important water is until they are taken out of water. And if I said to you for the rest of the day, you cannot have a conversation with yourself, with your kids, in a planning, you cannot talk to anybody for an entire day. Some of you might like that, but I guarantee you're going to start talking to yourself, or you might be on your phones or your emails. But we're constantly in conversations. So we have to think about what kind of conversations are you leading with? And this diagram that's in your guidebook on page 9 is that there's a dimension that we're either in depreciative or appreciative conversations. And the other dimension is statement-based, or we're asking questions. The bottom left quadrant is where you want to spend zero amount of your time. And when you find yourself in a destructive conversation, you need to tune in, pause, breathe, get curious, and get out of that conversation, which I'll show you next how to do that. Sometimes it means walking out of the room as well. So these are destructive conversations. They are not worth having. The next part of this quadrant is critical questions. Now, we are all guilty of having critical questions. Why would you ever do that? What were you thinking? Type of questions. I can't believe you said that in a meeting. That's not a destructive one. But these below the line, these are critical questions. And when you catch yourself with these kind of questions, if you just tune in and pause, breathe, and get curious, you're already going to begin to push yourself in above the line. And sometimes it starts with an affirmative comment. Great work. I love the way you presented the data. Or to advocate, say, hey, I prefer option B because it gives us more flexibility. These are affirmative conversations, but a conversation worth having is, I need to be asking questions. Well, tell me more about why B. How did you come up with that? Where are you going? What ideas do you have? Is this idea going to work for everybody? We want to learn to spend more of our time in conversations worth having. These are conversations that are above the line. We're curious and we're asking questions. So in your guidebook on page 9, what I would ask you to do at some point is ask yourself, how often are you above the line in affirmative and conversations worth having? And we advocate for a ratio of 80% of the time. And how often are you below the line in your conversations? And the research will show that we have a lot of critical conversations in our mind with ourselves is actually a higher number than what you have with other people. But you really want the 80-20 rule is to be above that line 80%. I've been doing this a long time. I can pretty much live above the line 90%. I do fall below the line. I do have critical conversations, but that's why I taught you the what I call the tune in technique, to be really aware of your words. And when you get really good at this, this is practicing emotional intelligence, other awareness, you can begin to help other people get above the line and begin to actually, you're modeling the way. So the appreciative tone above the line shows gratitude, respect, your open mind, you have a growth mindset, you're positive. Below the line is depreciative. where you're judging, you're blaming, you're shaming, you're toxic, you're very closed-minded. So we don't really want to spend much time below the line, and that's why it's important to tune in. So this third question is that the nature of our conversations make all the difference. And the two practices that I promised I would share with you today is the ability to step into a conversation that could be below the line. Sometimes you're stepping into a meeting that you know is going to be contentious and below the line. And the question is, how do I get above the line? And it's based on how you either frame things or how you ask questions. And that's what a conversation worth having is. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes going through these two practices, and they're practices, and they just take practice to be really aware of how do I move from conflict to a conversation worth having. So the research behind generative questions is they widen the screen. They change the way people think. They stimulate compelling images for people to act on. And they're typically how and what questions. So you'll notice in your guidebook, these questions are all in there for you. But, think of when you're in a meeting and ask somebody, what else might explain what happened? You gave a reason. Are there any other reasons of what might explain what happened? You have to make room for diverse and different perspectives. How do you see it? You've been really quiet, Maddie. What do you think? Surface new information. How did they manage that process at your previous position or in your previous community and stimulate creativity and innovation? What would be possible if we did a both and here versus a either or? So generative questions are open-ended questions, and they're typically what and how. So in your guidebook, you have lots of examples. And if you talk to yourself, asking yourself, where am I? Think of the video. Where am I? What's driving my reaction? What's going on? What don't I know? Every time you find yourself assuming or wondering, you need to ask a question. A lot of times we're like, we need to train our people on the other AI, artificial intelligence. I think this is what they need. Have you thought about talking to your team? And let's talk about how they're using artificial intelligence. What are they using? How are they using it to do things? What do they want more training on versus trying to think, this is what my people need. So these are generative questions that you can ask yourself, and these are generative questions that you can ask others. And so in your guidebook, you have these questions, and you just need to start practicing them. This is a simple situation. You have a colleague who is always late for appointments and planning meetings, and they just storm in and they never acknowledge it or apologize. And your reaction might be, well, they don't care, they're too busy, they don't want to be here. There's all kind of reactions we have. Questions you might ask yourself is, what are my feelings about this? Who chose this time? Might there be a better time for us to have these meetings? What don't I know? What am I making up? Remember the MSU, making stuff up. So there's questions you can ask yourself so you're not going below the line. And then there's questions you can ask the person who's always late for the meeting. Simply, does this time work for you for our meetings? And can you tell me what goes on because you're constantly late for our Wednesday afternoon meetings at 12:30? What's going on an hour before this? Should we shift the meeting times? But it's interesting how people get irritated when people are late, and you can have a simple conversation about it to possibly understand why they're late or change the meeting times. So I want you to think about, as we wrap up, this last question is that you can lead with a question. So instead of judging or assuming, always tune in, just take a deep breath and pause. And that primes everybody in the room for connection. And a generative question is going to widen the view, and it's going to move you towards a conversation worth having. So on page 11 in your guidebook are a bunch of generative questions. Again, if you have the guidebook out, there's lots of questions in here that you can use and ask yourself, what kind of question should I ask? Am I trying to make the invisible visible? Do I need to create a shared understanding? A shared understanding means that we all share what we understand of the situation so that we can move forward. And you'll start to find your favorite generative questions. Usually when people come in and complain to me and things are going wrong and they ain't an awful conversations, I always ask on page 11, my favorite question is, so tell me what your wishes are. And then I pause. And sometimes I have to ask the question again, but I really want to understand what are your wishes or how are we going to move forward? Generative questions will naturally diffuse the situation if you're listening. And this is just an example that generative questions can surface strengths, can inform what we might do and the results we're all looking for so that we can move forward together. It uncovers potential. But you've got a couple of pages in your guidebook on how to ask questions that connect people versus questions that trigger people or push people below the line. So the first practice is how you ask questions. Conversations about conflict, problems, and issues are typically put people in that protect mode. Stress is high, negative emotions, behavior is often authoritative or defensive. In my own university, I've walked into really tense situations and we are not connected and that's missing in action. And it's how I can first ask a question or frame the situation that begins to change the moment, quiet down the anger, the negative feelings in the room, and have people be more open. So without intention, communication is very depreciative. And I think we all have been here. So this leads to the second practice. And the second practice is positive framing. And that's simply at its most simple thing is talking about, so what do you want? You'll meet people where they are, they'll complain, they'll tell you what they don't like, what they don't want. But it's asking people, so tell me what you want to see happening. So the second practice, and in the guidebook, it's on page 16, is the flipping technique. And it's about flipping, taking a complaint or something negative and naming it and being really clear. So this is what we're all arguing about, or this is what we see the problem. So you do want to hang out and name it to make sure you're naming the right problem. And then you flip it to the positive opposite, what you want more of. But you got to keep going because you have to create a frame of what are we really here to talk about today then? And I'm going to walk you through 3 examples. I'm going to start off with a real simple example, and then I'm going to up my game to some tougher examples. But you could have somebody struggling at work and they have poor performance. So the positive opposite is just opposite of poor is good performance. But what you want to do is you want to talk to the person that if they were performing well, you want to talk about strategies that help you succeed on the job. This is what we really want to talk about, because if we talk about strategies that help you succeed at the job, you will achieve the positive opposite. Your performance will improve because now we have strategies, and it'll eclipse the problem. So the type of generative questions would say, hey, tell me about a time when you were really flourishing in your work, when you were in flow. What do you feel most connected to in your work? What resources might help you succeed? How might I help you? When you begin to ask the questions, you begin to surface strategies to help the person begin to do well, and they are typically no longer struggling at work. Another example is struggling with my planning team. I have poor relationships with my planning team. Maybe I have poor relationships in my community. And the positive opposite is I want strong relationships. I want to make progress with my planning team. Well, think about this. If the positive opposite was true, what might the frame be? Now, I want to point out that you can have multiple frames that you can explore. But this is just the frame I came up with, is that I actually love being in with my planning team. That's where I want to be. I might not like the being with my team right now, but my frame is I love being with my team. How do you create that environment? And then you would want to ask yourself these important questions. What are the best times you've had with your team? What do you value? You can ask these questions to yourself. You can ask these questions to the people on the team. Ask your team, what are their wishes? What does a healthy team dynamic look like? I've got to surface this information so I can make sure I have a strong relationship and love being with my team. And then the third example is, you're having difficulty learning and adjusting to a new client management system. We've used the old one for 20 years, and now we have to have the new one. And the positive opposite is I'm looking forward to learning and using the new client management system. Okay, if that's the positive opposite, the frame I want to talk about is how do I confidently use the new system to streamline my case management. I got to improve collaboration, and I got to be able to serve our stakeholders. So when you put your energy into this green frame, because the new client management system is coming, the type of questions would be, how will this CMS improve the way we manage projects? And what will help you feel confident learning and using this? What resources do you need? What resources do you need to be successful? And if this client management system is working successfully, what is happening in our project management process that makes us proud? So you really focus on this frame, these questions, so that you achieve the positive opposite, the yellow box, and you've eclipsed the problem. So what you focus on grows more. And that goes back to the principles of appreciative inquiry, which was question 2. So these were just 3 examples just based on, I know I was talking to planning people today. And so before I get to the last question, there's one more thing I want to leave you with is the do-over. And I want you to think about this. Have you ever had a recent conversation or sent a recent email or communication that you were like, oh, I would really want to do this over again? And sometimes you walk into a meeting and it's not even your fault, the person that was negative, the person that was blaming or shaming, but somebody has to step up and say, you know what? I don't like the way that conversation went. I don't like the way this meeting went. And I want to apologize for my role in it. And I want to start over. And this is my intention of coming together. And then you insert that positive frame. So it's not about whose fault it was. It's about let's ask for a do-over. Let's do this conversation over. Let's do this email communication over, or let's do this meeting over. And so when Conversations Worth Having first came to the surface, that was one of the interviews Sherry and I had done with them was how do you take people who are polarized and have a conversation worth having? Well, someone has to ask for the do-over conversation. Let's do this over again. Okay. So that's just something I wanted to share with you. So we're moving to the last question as we're wrapping up here is how do your questions help others soar? So I've talked a little bit about where your conversations take you. I taught you another AI, appreciative inquiry. We talked about how you ask questions and how you can frame things. Well, how can you strategically do this? So the heart of a lot of my work has been SOAR, creating strategies that inspire innovation and engagement when I work with organizations. So SOAR, its operating system is appreciative inquiry. It uses generative questions and positive framing. It's a profoundly positive approach to strategic thinking, how you do strategic planning, how you have strategic conversations, and leading that allows a group, an organization, or community to construct its future through collaboration, shared understanding, and a commitment to success. I only write short books. This book is probably 62 pages. It's a small book, but here's the essence of the book. You can see this picture here. AI, appreciative inquiry, is the operating system of SOAR. So when I go into a meeting, into a strategy session, into a strategic planning session, I already know what it is we're going to talk about, and I want to understand the strengths of the topic, the opportunities. I want to know what everybody's aspirations are. What do they care about in the room? And we need to come up with strategic initiatives that have proven that are results worthy, either meaningful or measurable. So get back to questions again, is asking your team, all right, we've got to do this new project. What are our greatest assets? What can we improve and even innovate on that we haven't done before? What's our preferred future? I know where I want to take the organization, where I want to take the community, but where do you want to take this community, or where do you want to take it? And then results. If we're going to come up with initiatives, what type of initiatives? How will we measure this? How do we know we're succeeding? So SOAR's been out there, emerged from my dissertation back in the early 2000s. And it's really about how do we do strategic planning in a way that is just not top down, but that we invite all the relevant stakeholders into the conversation or representation of the stakeholders. So it's just not the senior leaders doing the plan, but employees are engaged. Sometimes you invite suppliers that are engaged. So SOAR originally started as a strategy and a strategic planning framework. And so in your workbook, there's a couple of activities 4 and 5 that can help you with that. But SOAR is also being used as coaching people, helping people understand what their strengths are, helping people to understand the possibilities that they have. So you can use this as assessment. You can use this to coach. Again, you always meet people where they are, asking people, what's going on for you? What is it that you want to create? Tell me about the possibility. These are generative questions. And then as it relates to that possibility, you begin to ask them questions about strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. And then you create some. So this framework is on page 18 in your guidebook, activity number 3. But once you begin to use this, it naturally becomes how you approach coaching or mentoring others in your organizations, in your community. So you can SOAR at multiple levels. You can SOAR at the self, those 4 questions. You can use them on the teams that you're on. You can use them at the department. You can use them for strategy, strategic planning. And in your guidebook are activities to help you do just that. So where I want to kind of end today is ask yourself to be choiceful. What do I want my conversations to do? A growth mindset would say, I want to increase engagement. I want to boost creativity and learning. I need to foster trust and collaboration. I need to strengthen relationships. I need to open the communication lines. So the way you ask questions and how you frame things can keep your conversations above the line. A fixed mindset is is when we just are below the line. We're talking about what we can't do, what we don't know, who's right or wrong. We don't want to spend time there. You want to be above that line. So think about, what is the tone of your conversations? Are they appreciative or depreciative? Are they statement based? Are you asking questions? Ask yourself, where are your conversations taking you and others? And how do your conversations make others feel? And what is one small change or action that you can take today just based on the 45 minutes that we've had together? This is interesting. This is a quote from the first edition, and I think this quote is still relevant today. In a world where so many conversations may be separating us from the vast potential, may the questions you ask not just change your world, but the world of conversations. And last but not least, my last slide here is a slide from my kids in 3rd grade, and that they were taught. And it's, before you speak, think, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? So adults should never lose sight of that approach. All right, I promised Jim I'd be done at 10:50 a.m. How am I doing, Jim?
Perfect. Two minutes ahead of schedule.
Okay, all right.
Jackie, it was excellent presentation. Very informative. Thank you very much. Do have a couple of questions.
Okay, I'm going to drop the slide deck so I can see. Oh, you guys, maybe turn your cameras on if you can for the last
Okay.
8 minutes.
Okay. First question is, does it help or hurt or make any difference or no difference to state the purpose of a generative question being asked?
Well, you always want to, that would be positive framing, in my opinion. You name it. If you say to someone, I'm going to ask a generative question, they're going to like, what are you talking about? But if you learn to ask what and how questions and show curiosity and kind of lean in, you can start by asking questions, and you can start to name it, flip it, frame it, the frame. Where do we want to be talking about today?
Okay. Is there a substantive difference between a hostile one-on-one conversation and a hostile public hearing environment where you're perhaps the planner facing 50 or 60 people.
Yeah, I've been in both situations in my career. Um, I think it's easier when it's one-on-one to say to somebody, let's pause, take a deep breath, a time out. Do we want to come back in 30 minutes? But I'm not gonna, so you can ask somebody, hey, what's going on for you? Why are you below the line here? Is it something I said? So it's easy when it's one-on-one. I've had people implode in meetings of 50 to 100. The best thing you can do when it's usually one person saying, oh, this is really stupid. I can't believe we're here, um, is to say, I think it's time for a break, everybody. Let's just pause and take a 5-minute break. And then we're going to reconfigure and we're going to talk about why we're here and what we want to do moving forward. So what you begin to do is your language diffuses everybody, even the person that imploded. And then you approach that person, because I have in private, and say, what are your wishes for today? That wish question. Well, I wanted to be doing this. And I said, well, and I can say, well, we're going to get there. So you have to become a convener of conversations and being able yourself to, what I say, tuning in is, I'm aware of my emotions, I'm aware of your emotions. That's emotional intelligence. I can control my emotions and I can try to help you control your emotions. So I think it's important to and don't take things personally. I think that's really important.
Okay. Um, do the techniques change when there's a authority difference between the two parties? In other words, if you have a manager and an employee, or a mayor and a planner. Um,
No, I think you can teach up. So if it's the most senior person doing the imploding and you're learning how to, the habit of tuning in and asking generative questions and framing, you can begin to diffuse the person from wherever you are, from whatever position you are. I have
yeah.
been in meetings where I've seen two very senior people going at it, and I can raise my hand and ask a question and say, so we've heard from both of you. How might we hear from others in the room to see where everybody else is? And nobody's ever said, oh, that's the dumbest idea. We're not going to do that. They're kind of shocked because I didn't put them down. I just asked a generative question. And they're like, all right, let's step back from fighting the two people in the room. Let's see what other people are thinking.
Okay. Um, is your book, what's the best availability for your book? Amazon or?
Yeah, I think if you're okay with Amazon, I mean, you can go right to the publisher, but Amazon is usually the easiest way for people to get the book.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I do not see any other questions. Give it a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds here. All right, seeing none. Thank you very much, Jackie.
Oh, wait, we got
Great.
a hand, Craig in the left
Oh,
corner.
go ahead, Craig.
So, well, I didn't catch the title of the book, and then you'd reference the YouTube thing too. I see the other one blue link, but that's for these recordings. So I was, like I said, I didn't even know the title of the book.
Go ahead, Jackie.
I'm just typing it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
So if you were to Google "Where am I" in the Conscious Leadership group, you can get that video. And then the in the guidebook, the name of the books are on page 2, but it's Conversations Worth Having. And I'm just typing it in the chat. I can't type and talk at the same time very well. Using appreciative inquiry, because you want to use it to feel productive and meaningful.
And then the one other thing, you said we could put things in chat, but it's disabled. So that's why you didn't get any questions there.
That I'm not seeing where you're
It might have been
disabled.
if chat was disabled, it might have been disabled before we came into this meeting.
Yeah, you might want to check your
Yeah.
settings because I'm getting chats from all kinds of folks. So,
So
Uh,
so in your guidebook are the names on page 2, or I'm sorry, on page 2 are the names of both books.
okay.
oh, I got a clarification from thank you, Kalfani. The You can send chats directly to me, but not to the entire group. I think that's what you're referring to.
Oh, okay.
Yep. All right. Sorry about that. I missed
No
the
problem.
intent of your question.
Great job. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Greg.
All right. Excellent. Jackie, thank you very much. It was very informative. Just for folks before they leave, our next planners gathering will be on April 22nd from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. It'll be the Veterans Community Project, tiny houses, and a big impact. And those notifications will be sent out shortly. So again, thank you very much for attending. And Jackie, if you could hang on for a minute.
Sure.
All right.
Have a great day, everybody.